You have probably read Acts 2, verse 22. But I wonder, and as many times as you might have read it, if you saw the switch that took place there. Let me show you what I mean. In Acts 2:22, here is Peter speaking to an audience of Jews, and many of them were antagonistic. And notice what Peter said. Men of Israel, listen to these words. Jesus the Nazarene, a man, now get this, a man attested to you by God. Do you see? Up until then it was attested to us, we saw, we heard. Now he's throwing it back on their lap and said attested to you and to you and to you by God with miracles, wonders, and signs, which could be confirmed by the five senses. Now notice what he says. Which God performed through him in your midst, just as you yourselves know. Look, if they had not seen those miracles, wonders, and signs, Peter had been lucky to make it out of there alive. Because there were people in that audience that knew exactly what Jesus said and did. And he constantly appealed to their knowledge of it to confirm the truth of what they were teaching. A good illustration of that is found in the book of Acts, chapter 26, verses 24 to 26. Paul is brought before the king. And Paul is making a defense for the resurrection of Christ and the truth of Christianity. And notice how the conversation goes. And while Paul was saying this in his defense, Festus said in a loud voice, Paul, you're out of your mind. Your great learning is driving you mad. But Paul said, I am not out of my mind, most excellent Festus. In other words, he was a good politician. But I utter words of sober truth. That phrase, sober truth, in the Greek means of truth and rationale. And so he said, I utter words of truth and rationale. Then notice what Paul does. For the king knows about these matters. See, he's thrown it back in his lap about the truth of what Paul had talked about. The king knows about these matters, and I speak to him also with confidence, since I am persuaded that none of these things have escaped his notice, for this has not been done in a corner. If I cannot trust the writers of the New Testament of what Jesus said and did, then I can't trust anyone, because everything they believed and said about Christ was confirmed by those who were hostile to Christ himself.